than Mr. Ari Rastegar.
My man.
Welcome again, once again, Mr. Ari, on Entrepreneurship 101. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I
Sure. I can hear a lot of music. I can
missed?
barely, there's music running super loud.
Yes, I'll make it as disappear for you. Here we go. Go ahead, Mr.
Mr.
Ari.
Daniel Lucas. Thank you for having me, bro.
No worries at all. Thank you so much for being part on Entrepreneurship 101. And so, can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Sure. I'm a real estate private equity founder and CEO. I build industrial facilities, single family homes, apartment complexes, office buildings. We've invested in 38 cities, 13 states, seven different asset classes. That's kind of what I do in my day job. My work is very much my worship. This is what I feel like I was born to do, is to turn houses into homes, to work on increasing the standard of living and the standard of work for people all over the country and hopefully all over the world. I'm a father of three beautiful children. My youngest daughter, Isabella, is 6. My son, Kingston, is 10. And my oldest daughter, Victoria, is 13 years old. And as the raised by a single father who was an Iranian immigrant, my life has very much been about figuring out how to take situations that were difficult, like the Iranian Revolution, that took my family and threw them for a loop. Had to rebuild and start over, to figure out how to rebuild myself. How to rebuild buildings, how to think a little bit deeper into situations, how to look at things like failure through a different lens. And now I've come to learn, after studying failure for so many years, and in fact, I think failing is maybe the only thing I've gotten good at. Certainly, it's the thing I've done the most. But failure is how you learn how to win. And the book is autobiographical. It goes through a series of things that I failed at, from health to business, to life, and then the things I've learned along the way. I was originally going to name the book, what I've learned thus far, because every time I feel like I've learned something, I learn something else and make that irrelevant. So I just keep unlearning things over the years. So I'm not sure what actually stays to last, and maybe one day robots will be doing all this stuff, and you won't even want to talk to me. But I'm happy to be here with you. Happy to talk with you. Being an entrepreneur is jumping off the side of a building and learning how to build a plane on the way down. So those of you that are out to do this, I hope you fail, and I hope you fail a lot, because it's in that failure that you gain resilience. It's in the pain and the suffering and the trenches, that you become the person that can contribute. You become the person, that can add more value to their customers than anybody on the planet. And the people that solve problems better than anybody are the ones that have the biggest businesses in the world.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Rory. Thank you for all those failures. For sure. So today, let's talk about the building a billion-dollar empire from a 3,500 student loan. So tell us, your journey started with that amount, but before that, you were delivering pizzas and flipping burgers. When you were doing these jobs, what did success look like to you then, and what is the dollar amount, a title, or a feeling?
Well, success for me, in college was, trying to make an A in a class and trying to make it to my next meal. you know, and so
Yes.
so things start to evolve, but don't let anybody kid you. More money, more problems. And the only thing about billions that you should know is that billions starts with bills. And so
Yes.
small dollars, small bills. Um, but yes, I mean, look, I was I went to two community colleges before getting into Texas A&M University. I was an English literature major, so I basically read the best books in the world, for 4 years. I studied in Mexico, some international business and international communications. and then went to law school, and mostly because I have an Iranian father, and for Iranian fathers, you're either a doctor or a lawyer, and I didn't want to be a doctor, so I was stuck becoming a lawyer. But
Mm.
in fact, it turned out to be an incredible blessing, learning how the law works, learning how structure works, looking how companies are formed, and so much of how the law is in the real estate business, because real estate is all contracts, your purchase agreements, sale agreements, lease agreements. And so that understanding of the law in any type of business or any type of civilized society or semi-civilized society, you're going to need to learn how to make promises, keep promises. And if there's one thing the law taught me about keeping promises or covenants, is that the covenants and the promises that we keep to ourselves are the most important ones we could possibly make.
You were an English major who became an attorney. There's a path of analytical rigor and risk aversion. What was the internal conversation like when you pull entrepreneurial real estate, a world of massive risk, began to compete with the security of a law degree?
It's a very good question. It wasn't a fun conversation because it's like you having one person in your head that says everything is going to go wrong, like lawyers think, and then there's another part of the brain thinking, "Oh my God, things could be great," and being very optimistic, and that's what an entrepreneur thinks. And but the thing about being a professional investor, when you manage money for public pension funds, insurance companies, hundreds of investors across the world, you need to focus more on how you could lose money. And if you focus more on how you could lose money before you go into a deal, you increase the probability of making money. And that's what you would call risk adjusted returns, is, you know, understand the downside better, focus on the downside, because what happens as a young entrepreneur, you're focusing on making money, making money, making money, making money. And making money can be very distracting. And in fact, you can, get a little bit too emotional, get too excited, and you start to make bigger mistakes. But when you focus on how you could lose money, and really follow the mathematics first and foremost, you tend to make better investment decisions. So, you have to start to look at things through a different lens. And that part of risk management, that lawyers are trained for, has been an enormous blessing running a big investment firm.
Mr. Ari, your grandfather, the Shah's doctor, gave you a pivotal advice: embrace a business over medicine. What was the most frightening part of taking that advice, of betting on an charted path rather than a respected, stable profession?
Yeah, well, I didn't know that was going to be the path. I mean, what you're talking about, there's a time I talk about it in the book. My grandfather, we were driving through downtown Dallas, and I told him I wanted to be a doctor like him. And what's funny is my hobby has become health and wellness. So I still, I focus a tremendous amount. I'm not a doctor, a medical doctor, but I do spend a profound amount of time on health and wellness and vitamins and minerals and hormones and healthy living. So I still got to learn some of the best parts, from him and the things that he cared about. But he basically said I was going to be a businessman, and I didn't know what the fuck a businessman was. I knew doctor, I knew lawyer. I didn't know what a business guy was. And he said, "Look at all these buildings. You see all these buildings here in downtown." And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, I see them." He's like, "One day you're going to own them all." And I didn't even have 50 cents in my pocket. But as time went on, you look backwards and you see those little seeds. And my grandfather, also a student of history, also one of the first licensed psychiatrists, in Iran, and my father both are, huge students of history and of great books. And Iran obviously has one of the, richest and oldest histories of any country in the world. And when you study history and you study great literature, you start to learn things about psychology, about sociology, about great families and dynasties. And one of the things that unifies them when it comes to wealth creation is they own real estate. Real estate has been one of the largest generational wealth devices in the history of mankind. And even people that make money in technology and things like that, look at Larry Ellison, who's made a gazillion dollars with Oracle. He's one of the largest real estate owners. He continues to buy incredible pieces of real estate, buying an entire island, in Hawaii. And there's a reason for that. So to my grandfather, wealth meant real estate. And if we're in America, the land of opportunity, he saw that as real estate, even though he didn't understand real estate or understand the mechanics. And somehow that was embedded in my brain without me even knowing it. And some of the relationships that I started to build in New York City, starting borrowing 3,500 bucks to buy a plot of land while I was in law school, building a couple single family homes, starting a couple other businesses that I wrote about in my book that failed. Thank God they failed. Found me in New York City, again, working on what turned out to be Rastegar Capital, which is now, as I said, we've invested in 38 cities, 13 states, 7 different asset classes. And as a 43-year-old CEO, I'm just getting warmed up. And so we see all the benefits that we can make for our investors, make for our tenants, make for the cities and the communities that we serve. And it's a very fulfilling, very, very, very fulfilling and gratifying business.
Moving from Dallas to New York to learn from investor like Anthony Orso must have been a massive leap. What is the single hardest thing about leaving Texas and identity you had there to become a student again and the city that eats the ambitious for breakfast?
Absolutely nothing. I was ready to go. My wrestling coach, Anthony, is his cousin, and Anthony is one of the most decorated financiers, in the history of commercial real estate. He's now the president of Newmark, still doing billions and billions of dollars of financing every single year. And he financed, invested in my first entertainment company. And being
Mm.
around him, being around his friends, throughout the years, it's been, over 15 years now. We've been dear friends. I got to meet a lot of people in his circle. And by meeting the people in his circle, some of it kind of rubbed off. So after those businesses didn't work out, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do again with my life. The relationships I had in the real estate capital of the world, which is New York City, was with these operators from all over the country. So I started to raise money and invest with other operators, other people that I had met, through these situations. And then a lot of those deals started to sell. And then in 2015, 16, 17, we started to have made a bunch of investors money, invested all over the country. Then we started to look at what would become one of the most emerging cities, really in the United States, maybe in the world, right here in Austin, Texas, which is my hometown. So we started to buy hundreds and hundreds of acres in Austin, before Tesla moved their global headquarters, before Oracle moved their headquarters, before Google put their second largest office in the world, and started to prepare and lay the groundwork for some enormous industrial facilities, enormous master plan communities, and to really ride the wave and help shape and curate how a city, my home incidentally, would evolve and transcend into this Austin 2.0, of cities that have these types of massive headquarters, massive companies, massive population growth, and help be a part of developing it.
Hmm. Well, congratulations, Mr. Ari. The story of a raising $1.8 million for 717 North Hardwood in Dallas feel almost amazing. But take us behind the curtain. On those moments before the capital came together, what was your biggest fear? Was it a fear of failure, a fear of looking foolish in front of anyone who knew you just an English major?
I think all of the above. I think all the above. And you're right. I was just an English major, and I remember talking to Anthony about wanting to get an MBA when I was in New York because I felt like I didn't know anything about business. And he said to me, "If you want an MBA," I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, hire one." He says, "You want
Hmm.
two MBAs? Hire two." And it was an incredible piece of advice that was told to him by his partner and mentor, Howard Lutnick, that's now the Commerce Secretary and the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, that his mentor, Bernie Cantor, told him the exact same thing when he wanted to get an MBA. And so, yes, the fear of failure, fear of criticism, fear of embarrassment, these are huge things that you have when you're out there on a limb, taking huge risk to make things happen, or investing in the project that you said, 717 North Harwood, was a bankrupt office building, but in downtown Dallas was an incredible location. It was at the accounting firm KPMG's global headquarters, and that if we could, buy into it and sign some huge tenants, as we did, some huge companies owned by Vista Equity Partners, which the CEO Robert Smith, owned, and helped transition those things and release the building. It would turn into an unbelievable project, and in fact, we did invest in it, and we sold our position early. Our investors did incredibly well, and it was the success of that repositioning that launched this entire firm. So Dallas has been a huge part of our journey. And in fact, we're in the process of later this year, near the end of the year, to break ground on building the tallest building ever built in Uptown, which is the other side of downtown in Dallas, where the new New York Texas Stock Exchange is, where Goldman Sachs's, second largest office in the world is going to be. And so we'll continue to work on these projects that'll help, as I said, shape the most important cities in the state of Texas.
Mm, good, good luck for that, Mr. Ari, and looking forward for more
I'm gonna
success.
need all the luck I can get. So send more my way.
Definitely. I wish you all the best. You structured your first deal with no face upfront, especially or essentially putting the entire risk on your shoulders in exchange for back end split. Was there a moment of terror after you shook hands on the deal, realizing that it's failed? You have nothing to show for those potentially broken trust with everyone who
I
believe in
like you,
you.
Daniel. I like you, Daniel. You're a cool
Thank
dude.
you.
Yeah, I think I was a little bit scared, absolutely. But I also think I was also very excited. And I was excited mostly because I was too dumb to know how much risk I was actually taking. And and so I think the excitement did me a favor, because if I would have taken time to really think about not taking upfront fees or management, or how I was going to run my operations, I don't think I would have been bold enough or stupid enough to take the risk. Luckily, it worked out. But sometimes when you're an entrepreneur, you have to be very delusional to think that things could work out in your favor. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
Mm. And congratulations, you did it! You did it for sure. Looking back at the first KPMG building deal, what was the small leak you almost missed? At any detail that, if you don't count it, could have sunk the entire ship before it ever left pond?
Well, when it comes to the deal, I was very confident about the deal. In fact, Anthony was the one that financed it. He had Cantor Commercial Real Estate. They financed, the reposition of the deal. But like I said, you don't know what you don't know sometimes. Okay. And at
Yes.
that point, like I said, I was so enamored, by the fact that I was able to do business with these types of companies, and I was in business, in a project of this magnitude, that I was starting my own company, that I didn't even really, I wasn't aware enough of the risks that I was taking. To me, it was a bigger risk not to take the risk and try than go back to be a lawyer. So I was just happy that I was going out and trying to do something more than trying to take the safe route, of practicing law, which would have made a perfectly good living. I mean, you could have very, very easily gone the path of trying to be Harvey Specter from Suits, instead of trying to be an entrepreneur. But like I said, the level of delusion and the level of intoxication that I had from being an entrepreneur and trying to go out there and make it, and seeing dollar signs in my eyes, I wasn't able to really understand the risk. It wasn't until later, until the global pandemic hit, until interest rates spiked, until things started to go become very difficult, that I started to really, really, really refine our risk controls, really refine, our committees, and how we do things, and how we protect the downside. And I think a lot of times that only comes with experience, because, as I said, as an entrepreneur, you have to go take a bunch of risk, at the very least, because just even starting a business, 99% of businesses fail in the first 2 years. Forget about 10 years. And I just past my 11th year in business, early this February, through some very difficult real estate climates. But you learn to refine, you learn to tighten up, you learn to manage risk over time after that exuberance has tempered off.
Hmm. Certainly. So, Mr. Ari, looking at your trajectory from $3,500 to billions, what has been the most expensive lessons you have ever paid for, not in dollars, but in time, trust, or peace of mind?
Hiring the wrong people,
Hmm.
and hiring the wrong people, and then continually going back to people that I've trusted, that betrayed that trust, and going back to that well and not believing their true colors, whether it's employees, whether it's past relationships, and going back and wasting so much time over things that I should have had the awareness to know that they were broken, but for whatever reason kept going back to that well. But hiring the wrong people, hiring too quickly, and not firing quick enough can cost you incredible amounts of dollars, incredible amounts of time. Same thing with relationships. People betray you, which is going to happen, and it's totally fine. It's part of the human condition. You learn from it, but you don't need to keep going back to the well to keep learning again that those are not the right people that should be in your life. And move on and find new people and expand your horizons, um, and outgrow the people you outgrow, and that's just part of the process. But learning that not quick enough caused a lot of pain, but I am grateful for that pain too.
Certainly love the process, people. You've advised others to find your superpower and take care of your health. If you could go back to the 25-year-old Ari, fresh out of law
Ooh.
school and about to leap, what would you tell him to stop worrying about?
I would tell him that it's all going to work out. I would tell him that don't worry so much. Don't worry so much about the worst case scenario of things, because the worst case scenario never happens. And I would have spent more time focusing on my mental health. I would have learned to meditate a little bit earlier and learn to calm my inner world and not focus as much on the outer world, focus on the inner world and then build the outer world. And but otherwise, I'm very grateful for the process. I trust the process. We have T-shirts at Rastegar that say PTP, trust the process,
Hmm.
and that's been a huge gift along the way. But I've absolutely no regrets. I can look back now and see the blessing in all of them, and I'm very fortunate and very privileged to be able to do what I do.
Yes, indeed. Trust the process at all. So, to wrap up our discussion for today, Mr. Ari, when it's all over, when the communities are built and the skyline is transformed, what do you hope people say about why behind Ari's Rastegar? What story do you want the buildings to tell?
I want the buildings to tell a story that we helped create the framework for people to build their lives. We built the perimeter. We built an understanding not different than the way that Apple computers understood that they weren't selling a computer. They were selling a way for people to use a computer as their tool to build their life. That's how we see the buildings that we build. We're just building a potential, and then the people that inhabit them, the businesses that inhabit them, we look forward to seeing the creativity they can use around the initial structure that we create.
Very well said, Mr. Ari. So, would you like to build the highest, tallest building in the US?
Yes.
Okay, good luck for that. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, Mr. Ari, would you like to please invite our listeners to support your book, your advocacy, or any projects that you want to promote?
Thank you so much. Like you can go to rastegarcapital.com to learn about our investments. We serve accredited investors, public pension plans. We can see some of the deals we're working on. You can buy the book at Amazon or listen to it on Spotify or on Audible. If you Google my name or Rastegar Capital, you can find us on all the social networks at Rastegar, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in anything we're doing, please reach out. We're very, very in tune with the people that reach out to us. Real people call you, real people talk with you. Your call and emails will be answered. I left one of my email addresses at the end of the book. I've read thousands of emails from people all over the world for their experiences, their failures, their gifts. And if you have them, please send them to us. We keep them private, but it's something that I cherish very much.
Certainly, people less about Mr. Ari Rastegar, because if you support him for sure, he will build the tallest building in the US, tallest
My man.
than Dubai, than what the other in Saudi Arabia, what they're building right now. So, Mr. Ari, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, brother.
Monica people, see you soon. I guess.